said, I moved to the United States 2014, and currently I am a senior technology risk consultant at Ernst & Young. And prior to that, I got my master's degree in financial analytics from Berkeley University and my undergraduate degree from the University of South Carolina. You picked your passion, then you pick your degree that you're interested in studying. The next thing, you want to pick that top 3, top 4 schools that you have interest in studying in. Once you have those schools in mind, you want to go straight into their website. Most of the questions that we have are usually on their websites, and they have links just focused on admissions, and they have a section just focused on international students.
Hey Mary, welcome on Narratives of Numbers. It is so wonderful to have you in our show today. And for our audience, Mary is from Nigeria. She moved to United States to do her undergrad study. And currently she's working as a senior technology risk consultant at EY. So kudos to your journey, Mary. And I got to know Mary while we were doing our master's in finance analytics in Bentley University back in Boston. It's been a couple of years back. But yeah, I'm so excited to have you, in our show today. And I'm sure like she's gonna, talk about her journey and challenges. And in today's podcast, we are going to focus, on her journey as an undergrad student. So in United States, I'm sure it's going to be really helpful for all the international students. So welcome, Mary.
Okay. Thank you, Amrita, for that quick introduction. Like Amrita said, I moved to the United States 2014, and currently I am a senior technology risk consultant at Ernst & Young. And prior to that, I got my master's degree in financial analytics from Berkeley University and my undergraduate degree from the University of South Carolina. And also, I have over 4 years of experience as a senior technology consultant. So a lot of my role pretty much encompasses helping my clients, which are mostly financial institutions, with their IT risk management programs, with cybersecurity, with regulatory compliance, risk assessments, and pretty much making sure they're adhering to the regulations set by uh, the regulators. And prior to that, I was also at PwC, where I was also helping my clients, financial institutions, with their anti-fraud and anti-money laundering programs as well. So I'm excited to be on this podcast today to talk more about my journey in the United States, specifically focusing on my bachelor's degree and my journey towards now, being more of a professional.
Thank you, Mary, for your wonderful introduction. Like, you have tons of experience, specifically, like, working with Big Four. So kudos to your journey.
Thank you.
And let's get started with our interview. So we'll move to our first segment of questions, like, where we'll deep dive and understand, like, how did you choose your university and how did you do all the prep exams? So, Mary, let's start from the beginning of your journey. What motivated you to pursue your Bachelor's of Business Administration in Finance and Accounting in USA?
Yeah, Amrita, that's a good question. So for me, I have always had an affinity for numbers. I love numbers. I loved mathematics when I was in college, and I always loved personal finance. So that kind of motivated me to go into a field that would learn more about data and how to use numbers to really help either individuals or institutions to solve problems. So I've always been a problem solver. So when I was looking for a degree that I could really use my problem solving skills, accounting and finance really was looming large in my mind to focus in. So that's how I had that program set prior to looking for a school. So that's why it's important to first know what you're passionate about, and then that will really drive what degree you would want to study in the United States. And then when you know what degree you would like to focus in, you can now start thinking about schools that have good programs and have good reputations for that degree. So to answer the second aspect of your question, where that's what drove me to the University of South Carolina. I was looking for a good business school where I could learn more about accounting and finance. So the first thing was the quality of the program. So when I did my research, I try to find one of the, the best business schools in the US. So that kind of helped me to know what schools would be favorable for learning, because there's always something to learn and you want to be in the right program. Second thing that was very important for me was affordability. Being an international student, and we have to deal with so many challenges, with the number one being the interest rates, the exchange rates. So I had to think about schools that I would be able to afford, in case I did not get scholarship or have any other means of funding. So the affordability of University of South Carolina Aiken was very important to me, and also the affordability of the city, right? So South Carolina is actually a low expenses city. It's not really expensive to live in the city. You can get very affordable housing, very affordable transportation, food. So that was very important to me. So I wanted to choose a city where I can afford. So that's why I chose South Carolina. And when I put all those attributes together, this was the school that I decided to focus in. And I also had, when you have that desired school in mind, try your best not to just focus on that school. You still want to make sure you apply to several schools. So I applied to three different schools before I chose one. So I have my first choice, I had my second choice, and my third choice. So University of South Carolina being my first choice, and I had two other choices in case I did not get admitted to my first choice. And those other schools were also in cities that were affordable. So affordability was very important to me, as well as the quality of the education.
Nice. So, Mary, I want to understand when that thought came to your mind to go and study abroad, because it's a huge commitment. There is a
Right.
lot of challenges because it's a different country, culture. So, when, how someone introduced that thing to your mind, or did you learn from somewhere? If you could share that with our audience.
Yeah, definitely. So, as Amrita said, I'm from Nigeria, and the quality of education in Nigeria is great. But I was looking for a country that had a reputation for having one of the best quality of education. And for me, I've always been very motivated to be internationally vast. I wanted to learn so much about, other countries. I wanted to move away from home and learn about other cultures. So I've always had that personality to want to explore and be in a space where I'm learning about cultures that are different from mine. So that's why I wanted to study outside my country. So the first thing was I wanted to learn more about the world. And for other people, it might be they just want to, have that experience of leaving their country. So for me, it was really, I wanted something that would teach me the world. And I felt like United States was my first choice because it's kind of like a melting pot of so many cultures, so many people from different countries in the United States, and there's really no other country where you get that exposure to different cultures. So that was my first thought process about why I decided to pursue, a degree in the United States. And I also put it in mind that you can't be what you haven't seen. So I did have some friends from high school that had gone to the United States and had had their bachelor's degree from the United States. So that was also a motivation. The fact that I had friends that have done the same journey, that had gotten degrees from other countries. So I would say explore people around you, ask questions, and try to find out where are people heading after high school to get their degree. It could be a country in Europe where your degree that you have passion about might be the best country. So ask questions, find out from people that have done the same thing, and really focus on what you want the outcome to be. So in summary, it's really the people around me, and my passion to explore other cultures and gain quality education in the country with the best education reputation.
I think you have put across it's in such an amazing way, because definitely you learn things when you're exposed to something. So I'm sure,
Right.
like, when you're surrounded by people, definitely they motivate you. And as you have mentioned rightly, that the United States has infrastructure, world best education facilities. So Mary, like, could you explain what's the process of applying to different universities abroad? Because I'm sure it must be very daunting, because a lot of students, they do not know like what's the approach. There are tons of, like, the exams like TOEFL, SAT. Like, what exams did you take, and how was your, like, preparation approach and strategies?
Yes, that's a good question. And I will go back to what I discussed earlier. First, you picked your passion, then you pick your degree that you're interested in studying. The next thing, you want to pick that top three, top four schools that you have interest in studying in. Once you have those schools in mind, you want to go straight into their website. Most of the questions that we have are usually on their websites, and they have links just focused on admissions, and they have a section just focused on international students. So what I did is I went to their website, I looked into their international students profile and see what is required, because different schools have different requirements. Some schools might require TOEFL, some schools might require the SAT, some schools might require just your undergrad, your high school diploma. So you really don't know until you check the school that is pertaining to where your degree would be. So for me, when I found one of the requirements to be SAT and TOEFL, as well as my high school diploma, I started studying for the SAT. So it looks different for different people. I am a person that I like to study in large groups. So I enrolled in a class. So that class was a 3 month course where we're just focused on the SAT curriculum, the questions, how the questions are formatted, trying to understand, how you're supposed to be thinking when you're studying and taking the SAT exam. So I studied for the SAT and took that class for 3 months. So that was a 3 month investment just to make sure that I was going to be presenting myself very strongly to admission officers. So that was one key thing, is to understand your way of studying, and if that is enrolling in a class or if you can self-study, you want to make sure you get all the practice questions. I would say for the SAT, practice questions are key. You want to understand how the questions are formatted, because the questions can be tricky. So if you're not familiar with how the questions are set up, you won't be confident in the exam. Then the second thing is the TOEFL. Based on your country, the school might require TOEFL, and the TOEFL is the test of English as a foreign language. It's a test that is very, I would say it's not as challenging as the SAT. So I didn't have to enroll for class. I have English as my first language, so doing that exam wasn't as challenging. I also just had to study using practice questions and understanding the format of the questions. And I think that was enough for me to be able to take the TOEFL exam. So those are the two key entrance exams that are necessary for most schools. And then depending on the school you choose, there might be other requirements that are needed. But those key things are the first things. So once you have the results of those exams, you can then be able to start applying.
Okay. So, Mary, can you briefly explain to our audience, people who do not know what is SAT in a layman language?
Yeah, definitely. This is a test that you have to sit for if you plan to apply to universities in the US. So it's a test that is set up by the College Board or in the United States, and you have to sit for that exam before you can apply to most universities. Now, the format of the exam is usually English and mathematics. At least when I took it in 20, it was focused on English and mathematics. So it might have changed, but from my understanding, when you have those two focus, it really would show your strength in both mathematics and English. And once you study and once you understand again the format of the questions, because they are very tricky, and once you do well, That's one of the number one components that every admission officer is going to look into when they are looking at your profile before they admit you into the university.
Okay. I think that's a very useful information for
Yeah.
international student. So Mary, you did mention like you took almost 3 months to do a preparation work for SAT, and how much time did you spend on preparing for TOEFL exam?
So I would say I spent comparable amount of time, 3 months. But the difference in my preparation for the TOEFL was I was able to self-study. So I studied with just practice questions, and you can get so many practice questions from good companies. The Kaplan. You can use Princeton Review for both SAT, and TOEFL as well. So using those good name brand that have good reputation for having the right practice questions was enough for me to be able to accomplish a good and high score for the TOEFL. So really, for TOEFL, it depends on if you're from an English speaking country, you might not need to take a class. But I would advise anyone that do not have English as a first language to probably enroll in some type of class, and that could be online. There are so many free online classes. There are so many. I don't know if you all have heard of Han Academy. So that's one of the key ones a lot of people use for SAT as well as TOEFL. So you don't have to spend money to go for classes. When especially when we're going back to affordability, do your research and find classes that are free as well.
Okay, that's really helpful. So, like I think you already talked about resources and strategies. If you could share, like, what should be the ideal time for student? Like, if, for example, someone would want to come here and do their undergrad study, then what is the ideal time they should have that in their mind?
Yeah, so that's a great question because a lot of people miss out on good schools, good funding, just because they don't apply on time or they don't know the timing of a lot of universities I've set out for. So, again, going back to that first point I made about leveraging the university's websites. A lot of universities have their deadline for application. So you want to be aware of that and have it set, written down somewhere. This is the deadline. So you want to apply way before the deadline. So I would say if you plan to begin your studies in August, which is when the new session starts for most schools in the US, make sure you start planning a year or a year plus ahead. So if you, for instance, want to start in August of 2025, you need to start planning August of 20 or anytime before August of 20. So because you need at least 2 to 3 months to do your applications, you want to write your exams, and that's when you're going to receive your exam results. So you have a lot of things to do. So I would say you need at least 3 months for that. And once you apply, most schools are very prompt in actually responding on time. Depending on the school, you might be able to communicate with the admission officer about, the timeline, about when you need to hear back about your admission results. So you can communicate with them, but I would say start a year before you plan to be enrolled in the United States. And you have to keep in mind immigration is probably going to take you 6 to 9 months. So that's also going to play in your timing because the school is not going to wait for you. They're going to start the classes even if you've not gotten your visas. So you need to start planning for your visa at least allots a timing of 6 to 9 months just for your visa. So make sure you're keeping in mind that you're communicating with your admission officer. Be aware of the deadline. Start planning a year plus ahead of time. And I think if you do these key things, you'll be very comfortable to be able to enroll at that set time if that's August 2025.
Awesome. So, Mary, we did talk about like SAT, TOEFL, and you did say about application process. Do you want to touch upon something which you think I did not ask you? Like, what are the top things which people should make sure they should do keep an eye out, like application, essay writing, something which, they will just, it will help them to do a more better prep work.
Yeah, definitely. So those two key things, we have your SAT, having your high school diploma, having your TOEFL. There are other parts of your whole package. Some schools require you to write essays about why you want to study that degree and why you want to study it at their university. So you want to make sure when you write your essay, make sure you have it reviewed by your professors, your teachers in school, your parents, your siblings. Make sure you have them review it so that you're submitting your application, you're putting your best foot forward. So some schools might require letters of recommendation. So if you're getting that from your high school teacher, from your coach, from maybe you play some athletic sports, if you're getting that from a guidance counselor, different places that you're getting this recommendation, make sure you have that written in the best way that would show you in the best lights. Those are some of the things that will be in your package, but mostly I would say understand the school's requirements. And if they require you to have essays and letters of recommendations, make sure you get it and have it reviewed on time.
Okay. And is there anything like you need to provide your mark sheets of your high school? Is that also a requirement for the
Yes.
admission?
Yes. So
Okay.
the high school diploma, which include your grades from the classes you took while you were in high school's transcripts. They're going to ask for the transcript from all your high school classes, and they want to make sure that you'll be able to succeed in their school. A lot of these universities, they care about their graduation rates. They care about the success of their students. So they want to make sure you're already a good student, because the past would predict the future. So they want to make sure you in the past were already successful in your high school. And this is not to make anybody that you probably have some classes where you were not so strong on. That shouldn't make you discouraged from applying. A lot of schools are very lenient, very understanding of like situations. As long as you have good SATs and other aspects of your application looks good, you don't have to worry so much about your high school transcripts. But that would be a requirement for sure. Yes.
Awesome. The reason why I highlighted that specifically in India, people take time to get their transcripts. So sometimes that also delays the process. That's the reason I wanted to let our audience know that transcript again plays a very important role when you complete your admission process. So Mary, like, do you think like GPA plays a very important role? You did talk about like you don't have to worry. Somewhere did you feel like your GPA needs to be, is there any range or somewhere you think it would be more advantageous for a student to maintain their GPA to get admitted in a good university?
It is. It is very important. So the way a lot of countries have different formats of how they grade. In Nigeria, for instance, where I'm from, we did not use the GPA, at least for my high school. We didn't use the GPA formats. So we literally would have our classes and the courses we took with a letter grade. So it would be a letter grade of either A, B, C, D, E, F. So of course you want to try to stay away from F's and E's and D's, and try to have a lot of B's, C's, A's. That will make you look stronger for your application. So it plays a very important aspect for your application, for your admission officer to see the courses you've done. And for me, being an accounting and finance major, I had to make sure that in my high school, I focused on making sure I had good grades in my accounting class, my accounting classes, my commercial classes, mathematics classes. I focused on that because I wanted admission officers to be able to admit me easily for a degree in accounting and finance, because they can see I already did well in high school when it came to accounting and finance. So very great point, Amrita. I think it's one of the number one things that would be able to put you in a good light for admission officers. Of course, we spoke about the SATs, but the foundation of your application is really the high school transcript.
Awesome. So, for our audience, I think Berry has provided all the important information like your GPA, your SAT, your TOEFL score, your application, recommendation letter. So, make sure you keep all those things ready. And it's not like if your GPA is not that high, you cannot get admission, because I think like Mary would agree that they look at your overall profile. Like, you could lag in some areas, but if you have excelled in other areas like
Right.
sports, like those things, overall personality is something what they look for instead of just your score.